Good afternoon, everyone. I would like to call the Policy Committee meeting to order. It's July 20th, 2011, 12:30 p.m. First of all, I want to start by stressing out how important these policies are, the policies and procedures, because I know some of us feel that policies and procedures are not that critical.
Thank you.
And hold on, please. Okay, and I just would like for the public and the audience that are here today to know that these policies do come from the Texas school law. These are laws. So in this educational setting, policies are laws that we need to adhere and abide by. And just the way the student code of conduct and the employee handbook have policies and procedures, well, they come from this school law bulletin. And just the same way students have to adhere to the policies, employees, administration, and the board ourselves have to follow and adhere to these policies. And so now we can start on our meeting. Oh, I don't know if any of my colleagues have a comment?
I just wanted to add to the community that during these committee meetings in the future, the reason why we're going to look at policy is because we're working very hard with administration. We have been in the past year or so since, well, 8 months or so that the new members came in. We are part of the Meadows Foundation for Reform, and there will be several policies that we will be looking at to reform. We've targeted 3, in which you will see in the future that our staffing policies are in the area of working along with administration. We have several committees set up that are going to be significant and important in involving the personnel, teachers, faculty, administrators, and the board to be able to work through these reforms. So as a board, we are committing to the change that is needed in order to continue to move our district forward, keeping in mind the #1 factor, which is student achievement, and working on data and bringing more data to the table because of the fact that we know that there are changes that are coming through the pipes now with the end of course testing and all of these events that are happening that will impact student achievement. The graduation rate, the completion rate, those are always going to be at the forefront of all the decisions that we make. So just to kind of comment on and piggyback on Ms. Longoria is that these policies and procedures are going to be extremely important because these are the ones that we will need to adhere to in the future. Thank you.
Also, I concur with Dr. Saavedra and Ms. Longoria. I know that it's going to be hard for a lot of us to admit and accept that policies are there and there for a reason. And as much as we demand from the students to adhere to them, because I know that when a student violates a policy right away, he gets expelled or he gets sent to, consequences. But, we feel that as adults, we should be setting the example. And if we have policies in place, we need to abide by them. We need to follow them. A lot of people might not like it, but you know what? It's time for change, and change in a positive way. Like Dr. Saavedra said, we're here for the students, and the student achievement is our foremost priority. And we're going to, I think that right here you see people that really want to make a difference and steer the district in a different direction in a positive way. So with that, I let Ms. Longoria continue, and Mr. Aguilar.
I think policies is very important also, definitely. I think what is happening is that we have policy, and the state sends you a format for us to, especially the local policy, and it's up to us to adhere certain things that we want to do with policy and with the school district to move forward in a positive way. I think what has happened is I think everybody's concerned, and every administrator in BISD follows policy. Once in a while, policy is broken, and there's a consequence. And policy also includes board members, and it's very specific that each board member here and the superintendent follow policies. And it's not only the school districts and employees, but also board members of all should be the role models to follow policy according to what is written. And to be consistent with it is not just one person, yes, and not the other one, but consistent across the board. And I think people that understands that, and every employee understands that, why the policies are written. But when policies are not followed consistently across, that creates problems and animosity and all this, what would you call?
Yeah, conflict.
The morale is very low in our school district because policy itself only applied to certain people and not to all 7,285 employees in the district.
Yes. We agree. Okay.
Okay, yes, I concur with that, Mr. Aguilar, as well. I've been on the board barely 8 months, and this is the third policy meeting we have, because I totally support the policies that are in place, and I did include ourselves as well, especially us, because we were the leaders, and we need to set the examples. And we cannot be waiving policies or changing policies to circumvent one individual or several individuals. Like you said, everyone's going to be treated equally and fairly. And I guess now we can go to item number 2. Or Dr. Montoya, do you have anything to add?
Again, Madam Chair, members of the board, and visitors, obviously you've heard the general direction that we do need to take. We do need to visit some areas of policy, ensure that they are correct and that we can implement them for all of us, you know, whether it be in our district or staff or students. That's what the purpose of policy is exactly what it says, that we follow it and that we manage it and that we're held accountable with it. In that process, we sometimes have to make administrative changes to achieve that in a positive way, and sometimes, you know, those changes are not popular, but it goes with this type of activity. But it's good that we're meeting today to address these policies and to update them and to ensure that everybody knows what they're about and to have some input as this discussion continues. At this point, I'd like to go ahead and Mr. Arambula, if you would make some statements related to the policy issues in general.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya. Madam Chair, the rest of the board members. The policy committee meeting on the first booklet that was sent out, and item number 2, policies DEA local. On this first section that we have, we're going to pass that because it's included on the third attachment that was given to you folks. That one explains the sample policy. This one that's outlined on the first batch that was given to you did not have a sample policy. Okay? And DEC local, on the following page, on the first batch, if you might look at the explanatory notes, under compensation and benefits, TASB has provided the district a starting points worksheet that incorporates changes from a number of new laws discussed in the explanatory material that accompanies this worksheet, along with editorial changes that were designed to make policy DC local easier to read and use. Completing the worksheet that follows will help the district review and update its practices regarding leaves and absences. Please note that because leave provisions are incorporated into employee contracts, TASB attorneys caution that a district should not reduce an employee's leave entitlement after the penalty-free resignation date 45 days before the first day of instruction. FYI on this, folks, this policy worksheet is being worked on by the Human Resource Department, Ms. Guayar and Ms. Zarate. We put this in there just for your information that it's a work in progress right now, but it entails what the procedures and what we need to do to implement that. Once they give the recommendation, those recommendations are given to me and I submit them to Austin, They review them, and then we can bring that back to you for board adoption.
Ms. Atkins, Dr. Atkinson, if you have any other statements you'd like to share.
Thank you, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. One of the other things that we had looked at, and it was brought up probably last month, was the issue of the buyback, the leave buyback program for the district. We did have Ms. Zarate she has some copies of some reports that were run by both classified and certified. We want to go ahead and let you have those documents now. What you're going to see is a review by both departments of exactly how many employees have been exercising that option by policy and how many are currently pending and what the amounts have amassed for us. So if you can look at the smaller document, it's probably about 8 pages before the big document. I'd appreciate it. What you're going to find on this buyback looks like a chart like this. Okay, it's going to give you the current amounts, a little historical profile of what you've been paying out as a district and what we're currently pending. So if you look at the 2007-8, you're looking at a little less than 400,000. The following year, of course, a little more employees, both certified and classified, over 500,000. 2010, almost 700,000. And 2010, 2011, which is this past year, we had actually 76 that had already been processed. We actually have 151 pending for basically a total of about 1.4 million in payout. Okay. One of the things that we're looking at as a department is how we can try to balance our substitute pay, our actual account for substitutes in terms of the usage versus the actual amount that we're using to pay out. What you're going to find out on, what you're going to see on your second handout, and it's the thicker one, policies from around the valley that deal with the buyback program, and really what we'd like to have the board start to consider. We're going to go through our own HR committee. Our advisory committee will be made up of several representatives. We'll have some also on that committee from the employee associations that we have in the district. Our first tentative meeting will be the first week of August. That will actually have this reviewed more closely, but we do want you to start thinking about it a little bit more seriously, because we're going to be working towards making a recommendation to the board that we consider restructuring that buyback program so that we really look at limiting it for our campus staff, classified and certified, because those are the staff members that require a substitute. So I know as an administrator, it might be popular for other administrators, but if we're trying to seek some balance between our subs usage and also the benefits that can be redirected back to our campus employees, we have to start thinking a little bit more creatively and isolate really the issue at hand.
Dr. Montoya, I have a question. I know that these people that have been involved in this buyback, and just to let the community know, they will not be rehired, correct? You're
talking about the early resignation.
Yeah, the early resignation.
Right, the early resignation through the resolution,
right.
It limits them from being reemployed in the district.
Okay, I just want to make that perfectly clear, because I know we get calls, and you know what happens to these people got the that were involved in the resolution. Do they have then to apply? Do they have the right to apply and then be rehired or whatever? Just to make sure that they understood that when they did sign for the resolution. And I'm sure that that was explained, but just to clarify to the public that these people will be eliminated from any consideration of being rehired to the district.
Yes, Dr. Saavedra, as part of their agreement, their resolution, and the agreement that accompanied that resolution, they agreed to stay out basically for a number of years before being considered back, and that's part of the district resolution.
Okay, because the other thing that I was going to add, I know that they were saying, well, maybe we might have to rehire them because areas of need. I'm telling you right now that we have students that are graduating from university who cannot find employment because of the fact that, you know, we keep continuing to bring these people back after they, you know, retire or rehire. Whatever. So it's eliminating our young adults who are basically starting a new career, and there are math and science, there are the areas of need. And in some cases, if by us rehiring these retired rehires, and I don't have anything against them because I'm retired myself, but it becomes an area of greed rather than an area of need. So we need to allow for the younger generation who are recently, because we tell them, go to college, get an education, get a degree, you know, you come to the district and we'll hire you. And I get calls all the time. Everything is frozen. What do we do? Where do we go? And I know it's the situation in which we're in right now. But just to make sure and assure the young adults out there who are continuing their education that we will help them and they do qualify if they go through the proper channels, because there won't be somebody taking that slot and freeing up that position for them.
Go ahead. Okay. Thank you, Dr. Feather. What we are looking at really as a department, the critical need, the shortage area is a policy that the district scrutinizes from year to year. I think this year the only area that they were looking at really was a music accompanist area, if I'm not mistaken. Normally, we are actually blessed in this area. It's a blessing and unfortunate also an area of concern because we do have an abundance of people that are looking for jobs. We have people, recent graduates, we have people that are 0 to 3 year graduates that are still looking for jobs. We have an excess list that we're currently working on in the district. Very pleased. A month ago we said there were about 96. Right now we're in the low 40s. So there's been a lot of work. Dr. Montoya has been very supportive of the assistant superintendents in terms of work staff. That being said, we also have a huge pool of people, applicants, that need to be considered that are already certified, that are already degreed, that are ready to go. So our first avenue at this point is to deal with our own excess list of teachers and then go with the recent applicants that are already certified and ready to go. Again, the biggest thing that you all have charged us with is to hire the most highly qualified in terms of our teaching staff and to make sure that they're appropriately placed. So we don't have any intention of coming back and asking you for any leniency in those critical areas because at this point we actually have those areas covered. So you won't be from us through Dr. Montoya asking for any flexibility in those areas.
Dr. Atkinson, before we continue, what are the number of years for these persons that cannot return to or apply, the ones that are taking the early incentive?
You know, Mrs. Longoria, let me have one of the resolutions brought forward to make.
Okay.
Yeah, I thought it was 2 years. I just
There's
want to make
2 or 3 years, wasn't
It
it?
is
Th-
2
it's
years.
written there in the
Yes, sir.
Is there any possible way that we could increase that? Because I don't think 2 years is.
Well, unfortunately, now that the resolution's already been board approved and we already have over 200 people that have exercised that, we can't go back and amend it. But in the and I really, at this point, we're not asking it for any future, you know, reopenings or trying to re-execute those resolutions. So I think the attorney can probably answer that more. But I can tell you from my experience, we're not able to reopen a resolution or agreement that's already been signed and executed.
That's accurate.
And I guess it could be a practice, you know, where we are ensuring and making sure that after the 2 years, we go back and maybe add another resolution or whatever. I think that can be correct, legal?
Yes,
to be able to come up with another one before the...
Another resolution before the 2 years.
But that's like, yeah, we'll work on that. And that could be another reform that we're looking at, another area, because it's going to come around before we know it.
Right.
2 years flies fast.
I don't think we're going to be financially stable in 2 years. It's with other cuts coming next year. Okay. Do we go to the next item? Our next policy.
BED local, Ms. Longoria, is the next policy, compensation and benefits. During the budget process, the board voted to do away with paid vacations. The language that is currently in policy does not reflect such. Human Resources is requesting that the language be changed to be in compliance with the board mandate.
On that one, Dr. Montoya? Ms. Longoria, I have a question on that one item.
Go ahead.
On that one, can we have the staff explain, Dr. Montoya, exactly what the meaning of is non-paid vacations and how it works and how certain people are affected and how certain people are not affected and why they are not affected and what's the difference? Because I think that there's a lot of misunderstanding how it works. Now, I know that a while back, those days were given or approved by the board because it was something that wanted to be given to the employees. And I think we all want to give. I think as elected officials, we want what's best. We want to give. We want to be able to give pay increases. I mean, I don't think any of us here on the board are against it. None of us are against giving you days that need to be given. But if we can have the details of the days, non-working, working, vacation, not paid vacation, because there's a lot of miscommunication. I am getting a lot of miscommunication. Well, they say this, they say that. So we can go in detail to explain why, how it works, and why really we got to the point to do this.
Mr. Garcia, I think you had the specific information in that area.
Yes, I do. First of all, Madam Chair, board members, Dr. Montoya, in your packet you will find a copy of DED Local, and that's where it starts. If you notice, it goes into breaking up holidays and working days, and then it breaks the categories down by 224, 185, 187, and so on. What I want to do, if I may ask permission, I want to approach the board and give you just a little bit more information that breaks it up by the actual individuals that we're talking about and how much money we were working with. When we went through the actual budget process, we had, as a board, approved option number 2, and option number 2 included the reduction of holidays, in the actual things that the reduction of holidays for an amount of $1.4 million. When I went back and I started looking at that numbers, how do you come up to $1.4 million? It was really a combination of both holidays and vacation. If you notice on the information that I just gave you there, that gives you the numbers that are actually involved. The savings by cutting down on the vacation days totaled $1.2 million. The savings by cutting down on the holidays was $846,708 for a total of what we're spending on those two areas of being 2.1. Taking into consideration the budgetary constraints that we were still facing, and taking into consideration the almost $18 million revenue shortfall from the state, we had to make a decision as to which was more advantageous as far as savings, not necessarily for our individuals, but which one resulted in more savings to the district to try to come within budget. And if you notice, by cutting or recommending for the elimination of vacations, it wound up being actual $1.2 million. If we would have cut holidays, that was $846. Now, the decision then becomes, well, why vacations and not holidays or vice versa? Once again, one of the main reasons is the amount of money. The other thing, if you notice on the vacations are not issued out, I guess, uniformly. There's individuals that are working, now we go back to DED local, there are individuals that are working 244 days, and they receive 10 vacation days and up to 7 holidays. And then you have individuals that are working lesser amounts, 185 or 187 days, and they receive 8 and 5. So if you start looking at, okay, number of days and actual who should be getting the vacations, they're really out of sync right there. So again, that's how the decision to cut vacations came around. Now the next question that becomes is, okay, we heard about non-working days versus working days versus things of this sort. Just a little brief explanation. Everyone, all the employees retained their holidays, which we know that. The other thing that all employees retained was their leave. They had 5 local leave days and they have 5 state leave. Those everybody retained also. Now the vacation days was what was cut. Now the non-working days come in on those individuals that are working 244 days. They in turn do get non-working days, which means that if they are scheduled off and they don't use any of their leave, they do not technically they do not get paid for those, just like the teachers and all the other professionals. The ones that I think there's a misconception, and I will ask both HR and payroll to correct me on this one. Those individuals that are in 185 and 187 days do not get non-working days. So I know I've said a lot. I will answer specific questions that you would want for me to clarify to the board or to go on public record here.
Mr. Garcia,
Yes.
can you possibly go over the policy and read the major points so that, I think that's where we need clarification as to how it stands in the policy.
Okay.
Dr. Montoya, Ms. Longoria, we'll have Ms. Garcia and Ms. Garza. You can please approach the podium. Okay. Yes.
The policy.
Okay, Board Policy DED reads support staff vacations and paid. Basically, the first section applies to paid vacations and paid holidays. Full-time non-professional employees shall receive paid holidays and paid vacation days after 60 days of employment on a pro rata basis according to the following schedule. Biweekly employees and the biweekly employees that work 244 days constitute of your custodians, your maintenance, the mechanics at transportation, and there's other departments that have employees that work 261, or they get paid for 261 days. And they get 2 days of Thanksgiving. Those are holidays, which is the Thursday of Thanksgiving. And throughout the years, I think beginning back in 2002-03, we added, the request from a board member came to give them the Friday, Thursday and Friday. So that's how Thanksgiving ended up with 2 days. Christmas covers Christmas Eve and Christmas Day. New Year's Eve, or New Year's Day, I'm sorry, and then Easter holiday, the 4th of July, and then 10 vacation days. The holidays will be staying in place. The vacation days become non-working, which is time off without pay. So the employees will now be getting paid holidays of 7 for a total of 251 for those groups of employees under the biweekly category. The next 3 groups, which is food service custodians, workers and clerks, food service managers and trainees, and the transportation drivers, bus drivers, and monitors, they all work 185 days, 187, which is the same number of days that teachers, teacher aides, clerks at the campuses work, and they do not get paid holidays or paid vacations. This group was getting paid holidays and paid vacations. As denoted in the policy, these individuals were getting 1 day of Thanksgiving, and the reason why they only got 1 day of Thanksgiving is because they were already scheduled to be off on the Friday. Okay? And then they would get the 2 days for Christmas, Christmas Eve and Christmas Day, New Year's Day, Easter holiday, and they're not on duty the 4th of July, so they wouldn't get that day. And then for vacation days, they were getting 8. So because the vacation days are going to be, was proposed, it was in the budget, to eliminate the vacation days, then they would only end up with the 5 holidays for a total of 190 days instead of 198, or 198 instead of 202. So the proposal is to remove from this policy everything that's in that upper section. They would still get the paid holidays, but they would not be identified specifically, because when the board calendar, when the academic calendar gets approved, the holidays are denoted there. So there's no need to repeat them in the policy.
And if there's any changes to a holiday, then we would have to come back and change it on the policy. So by removing it, it allows the board the opportunity when they pass a calendar to put whatever holidays they'd like.
Okay. Then the next section is staying the holiday eligibility criteria. Because these individuals receive paid days for time off, in order to limit the amount of absences, we've always required for the employee, if they're going to be absent on the holiday or the day before or after the holiday, they need to submit a doctor's excuse. Otherwise, they lose the holiday pay. So that is still going to stay in policy.
And that's the same treatment that the professionals get, correct?
The professionals, they don't get paid holidays, but the professionals, we do have a policy in place that restricts only personal leave.
Right.
It does not restrict sick leave.
There is a difference because of the category
Right.
that they all fall in, and which
Yes.
is something that everybody needs to understand and really comprehend the way the system works. Because I think, like you said, the professionals, their days are everybody's days are broken down into the number of days that they're needed at the campuses.
For all the employees, their salary is based on, and especially the monthly employees, their salary is based on the number of days that they're required to be at work, that they're assigned to work, and then they have a specific starting and ending date. So their salary is based on that number of days at their daily rate. And then their pay is paid on a monthly basis, but it's averaged out over 12 months.
Broken down through the year.
Right, broken down to there. That's why the teachers and the rest of the personnel that do not work year-round, they never see a decrease in their pay for the time that they're off. They may have a misconception that they think, oh, I have the 2 weeks off during the Christmas break or the winter break, right? Because we can't call it Christmas break. During the winter break, and they think, oh, I'm getting paid, or I'm off during Thanksgiving, or I'm off during spring break, and I'm getting it paid because they don't see a reduction in their paycheck. But they're technically not getting paid because their salary is not incorporated into that, or those days are not incorporated into their pay. The next paragraph, which is the vacation days, that's specifically removed because it would no longer be applicable. And then the last paragraph on that page, we are removing everything that pertains to vacation and just leaving what addresses holiday.
Mm-hmm.
But those are the revisions needed to this particular policy.
Well, Is there any way that the employees can all get a copy of this in their paycheck so they understand the process of the changes?
The revised one approved? Or the proposed one?
Dr. Saavedra, members of the board, what happens here, this is our recommended changes to the board. Once it gets board approved, then we can send it to them in their paychecks.
After the fact,
After the
official
fact, yeah,
approval,
right. Well,
yes.
that's what I mean, is that once we've
Sure.
approved it,
Oh,
since
absolutely.
we're reviewing it,
Absolutely.
so they know that they, you know, because it does explain there the number of days, the working, the holidays, and you know, and I guess once they see it, or if they need to be explained, at least they can understand. Well, this is, you know.
And we do have a letter that we're preparing to send to the employees. We're just waiting for everything to be reviewed by you before we send it out to them. That will explain everything in detail.
Well, these changes still need to be run through TASB, or have you already checked with TASB on these, on the change of language? Before we adopt them, we have to run it through TASB.
Yes, ma'am. If the board wishes, we can do that. Normal protocol is that we send policies that we're looking at for them to review just in case.
Right.
Because the rule of thumb is that once the board approves it, we send it to TASB as a board-approved policy, and it's happened in the past where they come back and say, we don't recommend
Right.
that language or
So,
something, so, yeah.
Run it through TASB
We
first
sure will.
before we even vote on it.
Yes.
And somewhere in one of these packets, so many packets you gave me, Mr. Rambola, I read somewhere where these paid vacations or holidays are not part of your original salary, or not contracts. Classified people do not have contracts. So I read it somewhere in here. I can't find it. Well, you might need to clarify also that it's not like mandatory. It's a supplemental, right, or something like that. It's not mandatory.
This is a benefit.
Yeah, it's a
It is
benefit.
not a part of their wages.
I think there's some confusion out there that they think it's mandated.
mandatory.
It's mandatory, and
Taking away, you know, that they had it and we took it away. Well, it was generously provided for them before, but now we have to remove it because we don't have the funds to cover those additional days.
if I find it, I'll point it out.
You know, I think that in reality, people need to understand that we, again, we said we're going to try to do the least damage. We're in a financial distress, and I think that eventually the numbers are clear. If I'm not mistaken, I think, Dr. Montoya, you guys have already looked at the numbers, and we're not as wealthy. And again, I'm going to say it. We didn't have payments in 2008 and 2007 and 2006 that we have now. I don't know if administration can tell me what payments we're having now on a quarterly basis because of the construction that we've gotten into. Because that's part of the connection why we had to do what we're doing with these cuts.
Well, ma'am, may I?
Sir.
Some of this expense on constructions is because of the bond issue, ma'am, and it is separate on what we're dealing here. Since the bond money has nothing to do with salaries or benefits or anything like that. I'm talking about the $131 million and $26 million. That has nothing to do with it, with local monies, ma'am. I just want to clarify that.
I think that in reality, I think that the point is that we've been tapping into the fund balance. Am I correct? Have we been tapping into the fund balance?
Mr. Garcia, go ahead.
Yes, that is correct, and not to sound like right in the fence in here, but both of you are actually right, because Mr. Aguilar is correct that bond money pays for the actual buildings and the constructions, but also what comes with it is your operational costs, and those do come from 199 local.
199.
And some of the expenses, if I may, including the opening of the buildings, now that came from fund balance. Also, we're tapping on it. It was for 2 years in a row that we give salaries to teachers. Now, the plan was that every year after year, we will be putting some of that money back to the fund balance to build it up to where it was. But also, teacher salaries were included in the reduction of the fund balance, Mr. Garcia.
Yes, sir, you're correct.
Well, it's a reoccurring expense. Every time we give a pay,
Every time we give teachers a
yeah,
pay raise.
it's going to be a reoccurring expense. And you know, and we kept all employees. We retained all employees. At this point, there was not one single employee that was let go because like other districts did. And but nonetheless, I think I feel myself that we've been spending a little too much where we shouldn't. But I think that our goal is to make sure that everybody is retained as an employee and that we can continue to function and operate within means of our budgets, and that we need to start, you know, cutting a little bit of the fat here and there. And I think that that's what we're trying to do. Unfortunate, we take hits here and hits there, but we can make it work if we all kind of come into consensus that we need to understand the whys.
If I may add on to that. Mr. Garcia and Dr. Atkinson, I guess this really question is for them, since you all have been working on the budget and the staffing. Did we, in the past 2 years or so or more, hire additional personnel that we could not let go because we made the commitment that we were going to keep them? So in other words, do we have an overage of staff that we have kept on because we made that commitment to keep them, but they were not necessarily needed when they were hired back then?
Yes, that's absolutely correct. And if I can just say, one of the things that I think has started to materialize with Dr. Montoya's support has been that we have been very, very closely adhering to our staffing formulas, our guidelines. Our principals have been very, very good about also helping us with that. We've had a little bit of concern with a few of the departments that haven't in the past followed those type of formulas, because we're having to absorb them into our excess list, onto our excess list. That's been a big concern for us at this point. But you know, at this point, one of the things that I can tell you I'm very pleased with is we've all really have come together to say it's not the teacher's fault, it's not
Exactly.
the employee's fault. It's an administrative issue that we have to make sure that we provide the sensitivity and the extra care to know that they're not a problem. They're a challenge for us in some cases, but they're not a problem. They're part of the BISD family. We're going to make sure that they get a proper place this next school year. But absolutely, we had over 1,200 people hired in the last 2-year period, and you know, we had over 100 people in the excess list for a reason. They did not meet any of our formulas.
Go ahead, sir.
What are those staff you were talking about, Doctor?
I'm sorry,
In what
sir?
area?
I'm sorry?
Your staff that were retained, over 400, that were not needed. In what departments are we talking about?
The actual departments, we're talking about career and technology. We're talking about instructional technology. We've had some issues with special ed. We've got one other issue in the fine arts department as well, in terms of making sure our numbers, our staff meets our student counts.
What did you ever look into administration?
We are, yes, sir.
Because sometimes we got out of hand by hiring assistant principal for this area, assistant principal for that area, and it was never corrected. And this goes back to about 4 or 5 years. We have had 3 former superintendents with the issue, and it has not been corrected. So it's not only the fine arts, it's also in the administration.
All areas.
And perhaps we need to look also into central office here in curriculum. Some of this we tend to build departments. We have a program. Before we know it, we got about 3 or 4 people, and building, and then we want to have another supervisor supervising the supervisors. It goes on and on and on, and it came up in the plan. I mean, it's obvious that we still wanted to do this. So we need to be careful. It's not easy to be critical of past years when we are trying to do it the same way. And so you got to be careful with those issues also. Administration needs to look into it. Now we have schools that perhaps you have other, you might want to say, facilitators in different schools, and perhaps how many instructional leaders do we need in the school that is only about 250 or 350? See, those are the things we need to start looking at, and to really be fair, across the board, so we can say we're doing a fair job for everyone in the school district. We also need to start giving more responsibility to some of these people. It's easier for them to delegate, and after a while it becomes an area where somebody's just sitting around giving the instructions. The other thing is that we need to start looking, if you're really looking at some reform, you see, Monday?
That's, members of the board, your point's well taken that we are looking right now, literally, at positions at the central office level because there are a lot of administrators and we do not need as many and we need to consolidate. So we are very cognizant of that, and we're going to be addressing that literally in the next few days. Part of the reform process, obviously there's budget issues, but in order to reform and improve what we have, we need to look at those areas and how many administrators we have. And there are some departments that can be combined with less administrators. So your point is well taken, that we need to do something.
Not only that, sir. If you really look around at staff around it, we have so many part-timers. They're earning about $35,000, $40,000 a year, and they only work about 3 or 4 hours. I don't have to tell you.
We brought that up.
Brought that up already.
The last time, remember?
I just want to remind them
Right.
that there are other areas that if you're really looking for money savings, it seems to me that if an administrator needs to hire part-time, then why do we need an administrator?
That's like the consultants, where I pointed out some time back, we already spent 1.1 million, where we could have used,
You know what, Mr. Aguilar, we concur and we agree with you, and I think that Dr. Saavedra is the head of the reforming for policy for our district, and I think she that's why she was out of town on one of our board meetings. But like she said, everybody's getting ready to do this. Some districts have already, I think, gone to they're reformed, and I think they're working okay, and it takes time. But Mr. Aguilar, you're correct. It has been brought up to the attention, but it was, Dr. Montoya right here. He's listening to us again, and I'm sure he's going to get on administration that's also sitting there. Dr. Atkinson and Mr. Garcia will also start looking into it. And the thing is that I think that we are heading the right direction, Mr. Aguilar, and you're right. You as a former administrator, you know that you have a chief above the chief, too many chiefs, and, not enough Indians, and high salaries, sir. That's
well,
that's
I'm not going to
thing.
say that because I have a great respect for my colleagues. What I'm saying, if they're not needed, then perhaps they need to be moved somewhere else where
Exactly.
they can be
where they're
beneficial.
needed, where they're needed, where they're needed.
Because we just don't treat our people that way,
Exactly. So it's a work in progress.
Madam Chair, I just wanted to add to the conversation. Yes, Mr. Aguilar is correct. The other things that we need to keep in mind. Oh, you can hear me? Can you hear me now? It's okay. Madam Chair, like I was saying, Mr. Aguilar brings up good points, and he is correct. The other area where we are looking at, where we did have to retain some staff, is like when our Reading First grant ended, or Gear Up ended, because we didn't, although these positions we knew were soft money, never notified them in writing saying that at the end of the grant, unfortunately, if there is no position available, then you're without money because we don't have funding for it. We did take on, we absorbed them. So that's all for some numbers are coming up.
But that was correct, sir, because the 21st century needed some, what do you call it, fixing, fine-tuning, and I think some of the grant itself is what called them for supervisors that were never hired. And so I think that was a good move. I know there was a question about salary, but my golly, if you have a master's and after being so many years in the school district, you got to pay them. You see, and some people might have questions about it, but that's the way the system is. You have certain money per year, plus masters and whatnot. So that's what we did. But I thought, when I saw that, I thought it was a good move. We did not just did away with our personnel, but put them where it was needed, because I had already talked to the director of, state director of 21st century, and also the person at TEA, and she mentioned that there were some directors, excuse me, supervisors that had not been hired, and there was a concern for them. So there was just a good move to replace them.
We go on to the next policy.
Next policy, DPB local, deals with substitute, temporary, and part-time positions. The current language on this policy states that the district shall not employ a substitute who does not have at least a minimum of 30 semester hours of college. The language that is being proposed is 48 hours. Yes, and it's under the category under qualifications as proposed policy. That is the first section. The part that was requested has a title of Policy Committee Meeting 7/20 of 11 with the background. And yes, absolutely.
I'm sorry, Dr. Montoya, members of the board, just on that DBP local, on the substitute requirements, that increase, we wanted to see if we had any feedback from the board.
No, I think it's great.
It's really to, yeah, it's really to get us more towards the alignment with the Nickleby and the requirements.
The
highly qualified area.
So,
also, they're showing the commitment that they're continuing their education. They're at least maybe an associate's or close to an associate's, which is about 60 hours. So this gets them closer to that. And so when they
the other question for the local is the assignments policy. And there was a board last month about the supervision of relatives, where there was 2 issues on 2 different campuses. So we wanted to make sure that we heard you, and we wanted to make sure that you knew that really our recommendation forms are certified and qualified. There's actually a line that was included, a statement that's an affirmation by the administrator making the recommendation that they affirm that this does not conflict with our district policies regarding nepotism. And that's hopefully going to be a catch from now on. It hadn't been there in the past, but it will be from now on. It'll be in there for both certified and classified. It doesn't mean that because they're related, they can't be hired. We just need to make sure that this is a supervision issue that is clearly out in DK local. We want to make sure is addressed. Okay, so again, that's something that you all brought up. We wanted to make sure that you knew we were on it. Okay.
Ms. Lamar. So, Dr. Montoya, what are we going to
I think we have to being supervised, and we may have to move people. The reality is we may have to move people to keep it legal and safeguard, but we'll look at some of those.
Okay, folks, so we go back to the second handout with the background. To the following page provides outlines employee discipline language from TASB's human. It also outlines language and direction for school districts to establish and maintain standards of employee conduct and supervisory practices, effective operations. In addition to the discipline that has been provided to you, there's sample policy that is provided that relates to open enrollment, tuition, and possible waiver language as well. So the next page briefly gives you also gives you the page and the sample information on there. We can start with, on the employee discipline 1 and the sample disciplinary warning form on page 7. The disciplinary guideline checklist that was provided to us is on page 8. If you wish to review that, any comments on
Dr. Montoya, members of the board, brief comment. If you remember, again, last month you had asked us to look at enrollment for the district to try to recruit and attract additional additional students, yes. So that was something that we need to bring back to the table for you all. We'd like to see if we can get this back on the agenda on August 9th. At least that's a couple weeks before school starts. As we start kicking off, hopefully a positive PR campaign for the district on recruitment. Yes, on open enrollment. So we would just need to give you all right now kind of a preview of the actual policies that are in place, what some districts are evaluating that we can try these students district.
Again, if you know, we'd like to take students from districts. That's the bottom line. We'll build our ADA and our funding from the state, and so all of other districts that have done this in terms of the budget process that's occurring, and this I think would help us to from that perspective.
So, Dr. Montoya, Dr. Atkinson, are you going to implement this instrument into the handbook, the employee handbook, or is this something you're going to use as a separate instrument when it comes to the employees?
Really, just for your review at this point. Again, that's part of the documentation that we're going to look at with our advisory committee to come up with an administrative regulation that we work with internally. And the school's not in terms of it's a progressive discipline. We really call it more of a process because we're trying to make sure that we have it tiered. So that if it's a procedural violation or a policy violation or it's a criminal legal violation, there are different steps to take. That's going to be the biggest safeguard for the district at this point, that we're very strategic in ensuring that there are steps, years, and then, you know, it's very similar to what we have with consequences, the level of severity. Of the infraction. So it's not something, unfortunately, that we can do overnight, but with good, strong communication and collaboration with the different employee groups, as well as feel that we can present you with something that will be a win situation for everybody.
Well, this is good because I know there was some concern about classified employees not having due process, and I think this would help out in case we
definitely going to speak to that, right. Mrs. Longoria, and I think the board will be very pleased when we're able.
Okay, thanks. Continue.
The next policy Dr. Atkins is going to talk about is on sample policy that we were able to obtain regarding tuition waivers and non-payment, particularly Fort Worth ISD and McAllen, who did have some good samples.
For us on that one, and I know that you all just board approved one, and if this policy does receive your approval, this next meeting, basically we would call that that family that we would be waiving that charge. And the idea at this point is that it's going to be something attractive. It's a charge. The benefit to us, of course, could be anywhere from 5 to 6 students. So
if we waive those fees, we're still getting
ADA. Yes, yes, ma'am.
ADA enrollment.
We're looking at on page 13, correct?
Yes, there's 13, 13, and then McAllen.
Yeah.
So, several talk about tuition and about open enrollment, but the two in particular we're looking at is page 13 and 33, right, because they speak the way.
McAllen started to do that already.
They started, I believe, since last year. They had been losing enrollment very rapidly over the last 4-year period. So 2 years ago, because of the advent of a lot of charters that are opened up around them, they decided, okay, now we're going to waive it. Let's try to get these students back.
One advantage McAllen has is all those districts close by.
Yes.
With Brownsville,
True.
Yeah.
with Brownsville, we close by the bill.
That's true.
San Benito.
So I don't know how successful.
Okay, the next one, Madam, the third attachment that was given to you, title, agenda, and number policy, CV, instruction contracts and change orders. That will be on page 35. Handout. In addition to the current policy that BISD, which is attached on page 35, the following page on 36 and 37 provide sample language of other school districts that are currently language and change orders. We have Houston Independent School District, El Paso, Fort Worth, and San Antonio ISD.
And again, I think with due respect to the board, the goal is to try to reduce orders. You know, that we create up front an understanding what needs to be accomplished, but try to reduce the number of change orders.
Yeah, and I think if I could add to when we were discussing, we also said that when we approve construction tax, we cap. There's only so much that you will be able to make change. So if administration, if the administration that are working as construction supervisors don't take all of that into consideration, what changes they want to change, a door over here, water over here, approved, then when we're ready to move into the building, they come in and, well, they want more landscape, want more. We really need to check into PUB and all these other entities that are working with us, that once they tell us this is what we want at the beginning of the construction, why are they changing it at the end before we occupy the building? Just doesn't make sense to me how they approved. You follow all the codes and everything that they need, and then they can change. If administration can check with that and check that everything is intact and everything is par. Because I was really, that when you add up the money that we add, we a couple of thousand here, a couple of it adds up. So we really need to make sure that the entities that we're working with, especially our also providing either access to areas for them or facilities that are going to be utilized within this. So what we need to do is make sure that we get that information ahead of time, so we don't come back with a change order because they want more plants, they want more landscaping, they want more irrigation. Case maybe. What
is get some examples, very specific, and schedule a meeting literally in the next few days to discuss that.
And I know the utilities companies, and the reason why I'm saying that, because I know that in other districts where I have worked, it was unheard of. I mean, it really surprised me that the utilities company would, you know what, the landscaping that we approved the first time, so we're going to change it. Or I didn't like, I've never, it was a surprise. I went back and looked over that last night, and it really bothers me to say that we're spending, those additional, for a change order, for those kinds of things that were pre-approved from the very beginning. It just, we need to be more proactive and get it in writing if we have to. This is what you approved. Get it in writing, so when they come in before we vacate, come in and move in, occupy the building, that it's there. And that. So, Mr. Guerra, if you could kind of work on that with the administration, and to anything we can save, because we're going to continue to repair, to construct, whatever the case may be. So we need to make sure we get that with the utilities in order.
Yes, ma'am. We will look into that. If I may clarify, we have change orders and we have contingency fund change orders. These are accounts that are built into the original contract. We're not spending anything over the contract.
But and that's what I'm saying, sir. If I could, I'm sorry. Go ahead and finish.
We're not spending any more. And as a matter of fact, of all the projects that I have been overseeing since I took over this position, those that were completed during my tenure and prior to that, I have not seen one that has gone over the original contract price. Okay, Now, these increases are due in the contingency fund change orders and and when we have some things that we don't know exactly what the cost will be, so we will set up an account. We estimate that it will cost us, let's say, 30,000. It may come in under that. It may come in over that. If it does come in over that, we will borrow from another contingency account.
Yes, sir.
So that we don't have to come to the board to increase the original contract amount. You know, and when the city comes in, they send somebody in and they say, well, you need to do this, this, and this. The changes that I have seen have been mostly due to painting more striping for fire lanes, additional landscaping. We've had some instances where we have had to increase, add another dumpster. You know, where we had the plans to call for one dumpster, then they said, no, you need two. So we would have to change that area. But those are the types of changes that come in, you know, when they come in and they review our work, they review our plans, and then when they see that everything is in place, they may feel that, you know, maybe the fire trucks, it's easier if they came in this other direction instead of the one that we had originally stated. So, but that's what causes the changes. And we do have, you know, like I said, those accounts that are built into the contract, and we have not gone over any of those contracts.
Well, and I'm not saying we go over, but if we can stay under so that we don't even use those funds.
Right.
And that's what I'm saying, to be proactive in that respect. I know how the contingency funds work. You have it, it's like a little cushy, you know, for you to use. But let's not even think about that's there, is what I'm saying, if we can work with to make sure that it's set at that. And I know it's difficult because you start one, and I know materials change, and as you're using materials and buying materials, it may cost more. I understand that. But for us to save as much so we don't even use those contingency funds would be an added plus, just for us to work more proactively.
I understand that, and we'll work closely with them. But when the city comes in and says, you know, city codes, city ordinances call for this, you know, we have to comply with those before they will issue the occupancy, the certificate of occupancy. And that's why we go ahead and we comply with the regulations.
You know, and I know they've been very careful with this kind of monies in construction. I know that some of these bond monies, we have some savings up to how much $1 million?
When we look at all of them, I believe we were talking about 6-7 million that we have left over from the bond. Yes.
Yeah. So I know they're very conscious of what they're doing. That when you have all these millions of dollars savings, I think they did a pretty good job. Mm-hmm. And again, I think Mr. Guerra explained it very well. And so I commend you on that. However, I understand that sometimes some things are not needed, and especially when we're starting from the ground level, and then we have a plan, and then some administrator comes over and says, I don't want my office this way, I want it on the other side of the building. And that is when when it costs more money, when the changes are made from the original plan. And this is why the administration needs to have a better planning as to what this is going to be, and we're not going to change the plan itself unless it's necessary, you know. But, and not just because I didn't like it or I didn't like the color of the building or whatever it is.
Right. Dr. Montoya, Mr. Guerra, I do recall, and not to, you know, offend you in any way, I do recall one project that did go over the contract, and I think it was a science lab.
Veterans too, no? The high school?
Yeah, but recently, when we had facilities meetings, like 4 months ago, I did notice it had gone over the contract.
Okay, as far as veterans goes, that increase was okay before I started in operations. As far as the science labs, as far as the science labs go, you know, if we have a change to the original contract amount, okay, that has to come before the board. And I don't recall us coming to the board to say we need to increase the contract amount on this lab.
It was the facilities meeting we had. You were already here, but I don't know if you were already in operations when this happened. If I recall correctly, I think you said that the reason it had gone over the contract is because you were going to do another science lab. I believe that's the one that we have to pay. We ended up paying 87,000 because it did not
Oh, the
come
plans,
through. The
JAAP.
plans.
No, I'll check with Cesar, but I stand by my statement that we have not had a contract increase amount. And after I check with them, if I am wrong, I will retract that statement. But, the last time that he and I spoke and when we reviewed these, we had not gone over any contract amounts.
Okay, I know that. You see, at the Porter, there was a recite. I guess what we're talking about, that in construction, that's where the money's going, And I worked in maintenance and facilities, and I cannot emphasize how much we have to focus on the designs, the prints, the group, the committee that's overseeing and getting together with the architects. I mean, for now, we're not going to build anymore. I think we're not going to build anymore with some of us here. We know the financial crisis, and we cannot afford to go out there and build anymore. We can't. This district, I think, is maxed already to the expenditures of heavy construction. Maintenance and taking care of our buildings, that's going to be needed because I know that we have some of the older buildings that are going to need attention and so forth. But, we at Porter High School, we spent for another plan to recite because apparently where they had decided to put the building, it was not wide enough, the dimensions, and you have setbacks. So before you even put a blueprint together, you have to know your setbacks. And you have to know from the sides, from the back, from the front, where the building's going to fit. Whether the front measures 120, 130 versus 260 deep, and the back is 100. And sometimes you have irregular lots or irregular size properties. So what bothered, I guess, also what Ms. Longoria is alluding to is that we saw last night that 86,000 from that elementary to the other, which to me was very expensive, because it's not even a 10-mile radius from one property to the other, And then over here at Porter, the wing cost us another $45,000.
I don't recall the amount, ma'am, but you're correct. We did have a recite plan for the Porter Science Wings. Now, that was the architect. That was not the construction. Now, as far as the reciting of that plan, it had to do with the roadway that was accessible. If we were to construct the labs straight out, they would protrude into the road that is there, and also it would interfere with the baseball field. So what they did is they turned that around and they switched it over to where the portable buildings are, and that was the reciting. But that was not part of the contract amount as far as the construction goes. Okay, when we were talking construction, and that's why I made a statement that we have not had a contract price change, and I was talking about construction. Now, when we asked an architect to redraw or redesign the plans for a different site, or we asked them for different alternates, different plans, and from what they had already submitted, then yes, there will be an increase to their price. And that's what happened with Breeden. Now with Breeden, it's just not a matter of I have the plans here and I'm going to put them over here. I can't use the same plans because the elevations are different. The contours, the parking, the entrances will vary, and all those have to be redrawn, and that's why you have the price that you have on the replotting of those plans.
I understand, Mr. Guerra, that they have to do a soil testing and all that. I understand how it works, but we have to advocate and be very aggressive to make them understand in a sense of saying, 87,000 couldn't have been 40, 30, 60. You're talking about a lot of money that we spent there. And then over here at Porter, I graduated from Porter. I know that there's hardly any land left there. It's maxed out. When I went to Porter, there was a lot. Now there's nothing. There's no space. So, but we need to pay really close attention. When I was in facilities, I think that they used to have meetings and so forth. And I don't know. It's something we just need to start paying more attention at the cost, the expense, and maybe hold people accountable, such as the architects and the contractors. There has to be a clause in our contracts, and that's, of course, it goes to council to start protecting the district. because it seems that the district is always forking out. You know, it seems like, well, it's the district. Well, no.
Costing us.
It's costing us more instead of the people that are doing the work and having to work for us. You know, it's I guess we need to change the mentality.
I was just going to make a comment what you said. I from Porter, and I know there's no more land, and yet as board members, we kept on pushing it. They need to have a tennis court. They need to have this, and you have to that. And knowing there was no more land, we kept on doing it. You know, and you were part of it, Ms. Garcia. But you know what? I think this aggressiveness has to be done. I think in the past, we did it at Keller, right, with the architect. They had to be responsible for paying some of the expenses. And also we did it at Porter when the architect messed up on the second floor. So it has, I think in the last 3 or 4 years, legal has been very aggressive when the architect has not done what's supposed to be done and has saved us some money.
At Porter, if I might add, we had a tennis court that was built for 1/3 of the cost because we stood our ground and we said, no, you need to do this right. And, you know, that cost is about 1/3 of what it should have cost.
And I think that the UIL states that they need to have 8 tennis courts. UIL, that's why we were so adamant about when back in the 70s they built 8 tennis courts. Oh, you came and removed 8, but you're giving me 7? What's wrong with this picture? No, you took 8, you give me 8. And that's the way it should have been done. Because we should have noticed that right away. Oh, excuse me, there's 7, unless we lost count on one of them and we didn't realize it until they were placed. You know, and UIL, that's how I found out. Because one of the coaches from out of town says, hey, so Porter's not going to have any more competition at their tennis courts? And I said, what are you talking about? Well, there's no longer 8 courts. I said, what do you mean there's no longer 8 courts? We've always had 8 tennis courts. Well, you don't have 8. You went down to 7. That's what caught my attention. Because I wouldn't have known unless I would have driven out there to check. But it was an out-of-sight coach, a tennis coach, that brought it up to my attention. That it was sad that we had 8 and we went down to 7.
Dr. Montoya, we do need to work on the change orders because, as Saavedra mentioned, veterans did end up costing almost twice as much as what the original contract was due to these change orders. And we need to set a cap, and like Ms. Garcia said, we should start holding the contractors and architects accountable because it is costing our district a lot of monies. And these monies could have been well invested in our employees and students. It's taken away from our students' educational needs and our employees. You know, it bothers me very much. And last night to hear these employees practically beg us to reconsider the days. And it's, I know it was not your doing. You didn't feel good about it. None of us did. But we're in a financial crisis right now. And I'm very sorry to see this happening. But I'm going to stress, and all of us here together would like for administration and the superintendent, I'm sorry, to work hard, please. I was in the district 33 years. This district will be a big part of my life. And I'm here for every employee and student. And I will fight for them and stand for them. Thank you.
Go ahead, Mr. Aguilar.
You know, I think that is correct. We need to be conscious of it. But see what happens at the veterans. There was the reason it went so high is because it's when the steel prices went up. And this is why there was an increase, tremendous increase. All the materials that were spent, and there was no way we could prevent that because the economy went up. Now, not only that, but again, and let me remind you that came out of bond money. It didn't come from local money that would benefit the instruction, like the education instruction and supplies and anything like that. Again, that is bond money, right?
Do you have anything to add, Mr. Garcia?
Again, if you remember yesterday when the Bond Oversight Committee kind of mentioned, they said that they wanted a financial report to see actually how the money came aboard, and we're getting ready for the next facilities committee where we will show you. Yes, the majority came from bond money, but there were other sources that contributed into the construction of that school.
Thank you, Mr. Garcia. Also, for the record, now that I have some of my colleagues here, we are going to be having a facilities meeting soon, probably next week or so. I'll schedule that. And I think this is part of the reason because, the construction is something that we need to start focusing on. And, but I just thought I'd let the public know and administration know to prepare, and my colleagues, whoever can attend. Go ahead. Yes, sir.
You made a good comment and said we should have the money to help those people that are fighting for their vacation. Just for information, sir, how much would 3 days cost us if we were to give 3 days vacation?
Yes, sir. Let me see if I can calculate that figure. If you notice on the one that I gave you, it gives you the employee count, and then it gives you their daily rate. So 3 days, let's say that it's approximately, and what I'm going to do, let me show you how I'm doing the math. If you notice 199.04 by 2 on the second line item, it says F200 food service trainees 2 daily rate 199. So let's go ahead and I'm just using numbers there. So if I go 199 divided by 2, 199 divided by 2, that's going to give me a daily rate $99.50. So let's use $100 per day. So if you say 3, that would be 300, and then the total number that are involved is hold on. 1527 times 300. 1527 times 300. That would cost 458,000, give or less, more or less. Yes, sir. About half a $1 million.
I noticed that when you give us I think it was in April budget meeting, that you removed some of these professional benefits from the budget that were supposed to be cut, and it was a total of $2.3 million. And you said that they were going to make it up through other sources of money.
In April?
Yeah.
And
it was at the last meeting that we all had. In fact, you sent me that information on the CD. It said, like, for instance, I think I should have called you for that paper because I don't. But I do recall it was the number of stipends were not reduced. Correct?
Yes. Okay. Now
remember that, and he said it was a total of $2.3 million.
That's you're referring to the final one when we approved and we talked about. It was in June on the stipends and things. Right. What threw me off was the April date. Yes,
okay. and you said that eventually we'll find that kind of money to make the difference, right?
That is correct.
I wonder if you can make it happen again for these poor people from 400,000.
Well,
but you know I'm going to ask you why, Dr. Montoya. We ask everybody 30% cut, right? And what do we do with those people? 100%. You know what 30% is? Only 3 days. They could deduct the 7 days, left with 3 days. So that's where I'm coming from, Garcia.
Yes, sir. You come from a very good angle, and certainly administration is willing to consider.
Can you look at it?
Yes. Right. Yes. No, I understand, and I'm agreeing with you. But kind of like the suspense novels here, or the suspense channels here. But stay tuned. Stay tuned because our next meeting is going to be our insurance meeting, and I think that if you're happy right now, I think you're going to be happier. And I'm being sarcastic. It's the opposite. Yes. I think that once we go over the insurance numbers and where we're at and where we're headed, yeah, let's look at that, and then let's look at other options, because I think that it's going to be a difficult
an eye opener.
Yes, don't miss the next episode. Yeah, for sure. That's next. So.
Okay. Well, let's take Mr. Aguilar's notes because I think we all would want, we're trying to do our best, but let's keep them in the notes also as well that we can look at.
You know, they know more than you and I to a penny.
Oh, yes. Oh, yes.
They have and how much it increase and they can describe it to the penny.
It's a big impact. It's a big impact. But you know what? I think we're very blessed that we didn't let go of one single employee, Mr. Aguilar.
Well, that was a whole goal.
That should, that was our goal. That was our mission, and we have
another angle to look at.
Yeah,
Now
we
we
can
gotta look at
revisit
something else.
several angles, and that'll be one. I mean, we always want to find more money for employees. That's our goal. So, yes.
An epiphany.
Hey, if we go on to page 38, the next policy after CV local, TASB provided sample language for DEA local that's regarding disaster pay. The proposed policy allows the board to pay employees under natural disasters or business necessity. And if I may, I'll read the sample language that was provided, and it goes as the emergency closing of schools during a disaster for any cause shall be at the discretion of the superintendent. During an emergency closing for which the work days are not scheduled to be made up at a later date, all employees may continue to be paid for the regular duty schedule, regardless of whether the employees are required to report to work. Again, this is sample language that was provided.
Questions?
no.
And then going on to page 41, the final policy that was requested to be brought was DGBA local regarding employee complaints and grievances. Page 41. Okay, under the category of delegation, the language goes as follows. The board delegates to the superintendent the ability to abate a grievance timely filed when in his or her opinion adequate resolution of the grievance will be aided by the results of an investigation. Such investigation shall be conducted expeditiously to bring prompt closure to the process. Now, I might add, in June, the district received Policy Update 90. The policy update had been reviewed by myself and our staff at the records office. Those policies were recently disseminated to all the department heads to review last week. We anticipate that in the next week or no later than the next 2 weeks, we'll call for an administrators meeting to come in and review the policies that were presented by TASB. Subsequently, we plan to report that back to you. In that policy update, all these policies that we're reviewing, we plan to put those in there so that they can be re-reviewed with the sample language.
Thank you.
That concludes all the policies that were requested to be brought to the board.
Okay, now we continue with number 3, public input regarding items reviewed and discussed.
I'm sorry, Mrs. Longoria, before Mr. Bodego, I'm sorry. Get comfortable one more time. I'm sorry, we did have one more, and really more of a, just a clarification. Apparently it had been brought up to the board since the fall. There have been a couple of discussions with the board through the policy committee. Mrs. Square, you want to approach the podium. We do have policy regarding criminal history checks and how they are addressed by the district through policy. We had a segment, I guess it's a Channel 5, Where Are They Now? Do you know your employees type of a segment that spurred that in the fall. It has been something that's been discussed again through the board and administration. Where does have a little bit of an update for you all to consider at this time.
We've been working diligently on this, but last time we met, we had a question pending as to what, for those employees that may have had a hit during the fingerprinting process. If you recall, we came with some charges that we didn't know what the district wanted to do in this regard. Do we stick to our policy that's very strict, or are we going to waive a certain time period just for those people? New hires, we have a policy in place. It's very straightforward. It's very strict, and we go by that. But we had some current employees that we needed feedback on before the new school year starts as to what direction do we want to go. Do we want to adhere to the policy, which would mean releasing several people, or are we going to waive those that took place, 10, 20, 30 years ago for that group? That's the feedback that HR is in need of.
How does the policy read right now?
You want to make a reference to the policy?
Yes, we have two policies that we refer to normally, DBAA and DH is for the new hires. DBAA, it says at the superintendent's discretion, the district shall not employ an applicant who is a convicted felon, is convicted of a misdemeanor involving moral turpitude, is charged with a felony or misdemeanor involving moral turpitude until there's a final disposition, is on probation for any offense that would otherwise restrict employment, has been terminated and is within 3 years of the termination date, fails to complete the exit interview process, or has been terminated because of workplace misconduct. It goes on to say persons charged with a criminal offense that was dismissed through deferred adjudication may be considered for employment after 5 years, except for, and then it lists certain charges that we do not waive. And we stick to that when we're hiring people. The question we had is what with those individuals that may have had charges during their employment.
Go ahead, Ms. Garcia.
This question's for Dr. Montoya. Could we have that agenda item be brought to us in the August as that item as an agenda item so we can review and look at it and then discuss with council?
Yes.
Discuss with council as well.
We may go ahead and share it with council to start looking at it ahead of time, and then bring it in the August board meeting. It does need to be addressed because there's some issues with certain employees and what's happened to them in their past. So
I would rather get legal
to get involved with this, and we can't.
I appreciate it. Thank you.
Any public input? Oh, go ahead.
I would hope we would grandfather most of these people unless they were really bad things. But that's another issue. In reference, thank you all very much for your hard work. And in reference to policy and law and TASB, TASB is not God. Their goal is to help the districts to handle the business of school districts. But they are slanted towards school districts and not towards employees. And when there is legal standing for something, we have no choice but to follow it. The state mandates it. It's state law. But when there is policy, then this board and this administration has a right to change that policy. You have a right to disagree with TASB if you feel that it is not helping our employees. And a very quick example, and then I'll go on. The 30 days that we buy, that's policy, right? It's not recommended by TASB. It's something we have done, and it is something we can change. I hope we don't do it, but we can. You can. You can make that decision. TASB would not be involved in that. So let us be clear about what is legal and what is local policy, and the fact that local policy can be adjusted to a school board's and a school district's needs. On the buyback, that administration was going to be exempted. Question to Atkinson, Dr. Atkinson, through the chair.
Montoya?
Dr. Montoya, members of the board, Mr. Borrego, the recommendation at this point, one of the areas, of course, is we look at strictly at the campus personnel being eligible for the buyback program.
Oh, so administration would no longer be eligible.
Campus staff, which is administrator, officers, classified staff, as long as they're campus staff, they would be the ones that would be eligible for any type of a buyback program at this point.
And the administrators would not be eligible.
There are several recommendations being considered. The primary focus, again, is to make sure that we issue of our campus. There have been other issues or other recommendations that we would have administrators would be allowed, or non-campus-based employees, $75 or 75 up to 100 days. Options there, but recommendation right now, what we're looking at is being able to address our staff first.
Appreciate that you're going to put the table on.
Sure, absolutely.
Thank you very much. On the buyback, on the retiree hire, I definitely agree with you, because we do need to take care of our people that are coming out of college, especially our own college here, our own kids. But we also have to maybe do away with Teach America, which is hiring kids from God knows where, and they don't speak English. Kids can cuss at them, and they don't even know what's happening. And they don't speak Spanish, obviously. And the ACP program, if they're fully qualified and certified, and they come in through that door, I guess it's okay. But with the ACP program, as happened to my daughter was fully certified, took all the tests, she had special ed, bilingual, and something else, pre-K to 4. And I asked through public info if anybody had been hired in a position where she was certified that was under the certification program. And there were 28 people that were hired before my daughter that were not fully certified and qualified. And that's not. With the change of the non-working days, question to whoever wants to answer it, when do 10 more days? Do they report later and leave earlier because they're no longer being paid?
A little that Atkinson.
Dr. Montoya, members of the board, Borrego, that's still in action, and I think it will happen next week as we start meeting with some of those departments that would be immediately, that will come to understanding that would be beneficial for both the district and the employee. Okay.
And I would stress that if they are required to start at the same time and leave at the same time, and they have those non-working days, that they deny the use of those days, where you get where the year is over for them, and they didn't use those non-working days, because that would not be fair to them.
Yes, sir.
On the substitutes, the 48 hours are guaranteed. I mean, the others are grandfathered on the new 48-hour issue. All the other substitutes will be grandfathered, or we'll have a full.
New ones.
The new ones enrolling, coming in.
Okay. On the compensatory time, is that accumulated at 1.5? Page 40.
Dr. Montoya, members of the board, Mr. Board, we do not calculate that any longer.
Gone?
Do you want to address that for him?
Very quickly, by law, we have to describe what compensatory is. It's in district has made it a practice for many years, as long as I've been here, that they would not pay compensatory time, they pay overtime.
Does that include security?
We have not paid compensatory time, we pay overtime to all employees that earn that. It was too difficult for the system to keep track of the time we have it, and that's the purpose behind it.
On the boarding clerk, are concerned, complaints through the informal conference. We welcome that as an association. We welcome it a lot because the grievance process in our opinion is broken. Once I file a grievance, it's automatically number 2. No discussion has occurred. And that leads to a lot of bad feelings and situations that come up to the board, and the board shouldn't even be looking at them sometimes. So we welcome that. The only thing that I would comment is that we have to train our administrators that the process should start before, and we should also notify our employees that there's a process that they can follow through before that, filing a grievance, and we agree with that completely. And now I'm going to shut up.
Okay, next.
I just want to make a comment, George. Teach America, of course, I've always preferred to have our people from the university to be hired. But in fairness to that program, I be teacher entry, and I was very fortunate to be different years American personnel. And may I say that they had 100% passing under tax in all core subjects,
Wow.
both of them. So there's some good teachers. I don't think that's the issue. The issue is that I think we should be giving our people from graduate at the universities some preference. That's what
And there's one more little codicil since you opened up the subject, and that is that some of these teachers are very good and the district and go to charter schools, and guess who they
build a
get?
school district, right?
All our good kids and take them away. But it is a program for the rest of the United States.
Any more public comment? We don't mean to rush, but we have another meeting at 2:30.
Good afternoon. Most of today's issues concern the classified employees, so I'm going to let these other guys address those. On the proposed change to the grievance policy where the board delegates superintendent the ability to debate a grievance filed with his or her, when in her opinion, adequate resolution will be aided by the results of the investigation. This issue came up a few years ago. There was an attempt to place into the policy the ability to conduct an investigation between levels of grievances that would surprise, and it was kind of a gotcha with this one too, because it doesn't say investigation must be presented and made available during that process. I suggest holding off on that till we get some more specific language in there that makes the process more fair. And that's, keep it quick. There are a couple other things, but I'm just going to keep it quick today. So thanks a lot.
Oh, it's okay. Okay. Thank you, Mr. Clark.
Good afternoon, Ms. Longoria, Dr. Montoya, members of the board. Patrick Hama speaking for the Association of Brownsville. Brownsville. When I think of policy, I think of it as a rule book. You develop your policy, you develop your rule book, and you need to follow the rules. And I'm going to try and do some circular logic and come back to that in a second. Like George said, we're very We like very much the language that was put into the effective discipline plan for classified. Recommend administration for that. Looking forward to that, hopefully going to the next board meeting for approval. I want to talk about, because John mentioned last night, Texas Tribune. The Texas Tribune back in the spring put out public information on the salaries of every employee in this district, okay, from the superintendent down to the lowest one. And that's not the point of discussion here, but what caught my eye on that was the median wage. Okay, over half the employees in this district are either certified, okay, they're in a special assignment, or administrative. Most of us have masters. First year teacher starts at $44,000. So taking all that into consideration, I was pretty surprised to see that the median wage for this district is $37,700, which tells us we don't pay our classified employees very much. People that spoke to you in open forum last night, our public audience, okay, make less than a living wage. And when I talked to the board a year ago, or a little over a year ago, and requesting a raise for classified, a living wage a year ago was $12.70 an hour. And both those people were significantly below that. Reno times are tough. We are appreciative of the fact that there have not been furloughs. But when you look at what was Mr. Garcia so well said last night, when looking at removing the 10 vacation days, you were looking at saving $872,000. If you only take 3 days away, as per Laws recommendation, which for 30%, which would get you down to 5 for class for those who have it. The 458,000. If you come back on and you hire first-year teachers, and let's say roughly there's 20 retiree hires, you're saving right, roughly I said. Okay, I'm going to use 20 because I already did the math over here, Chrissy, so don't mess me up.
Round it up.
That'd be about $500,000. That pays for this. And that also, and I'm going to put myself, most of those people are in my age category, close to it. You're also going to save, and a little bit of good news for the next meeting, you would also save on health insurance because you're more likely to use it. Or if you brought in first-year employees, they're much less likely to use it. So there's an additional savings right there.
And John, Patrick, just to add to that, we also hires, we pay the penalty, which is 12%. So that's an additional savings.
So you take that into consideration.
Mr. Aguilar alluded to the fact, and this is, and I'm sorry to interrupt, but before,
I appreciate it.
I'll forget because, I'm getting close to that. If I don't do it, when you look at the staffing, Dr. Montoya, and I think Mr. Aguilar brought a good point, we have a lot of people that are part-time. We don't need the part-time anymore. Really don't. In our staff that we have over that we could cover those part-timers. So that's another chunk. If you look at the part-timers, how much they're making as well, we can eliminate. Let's look at eliminate. There's 4 that you know? 400, yeah. So if we can look at that, that's $400,000 more, And so these are things we need to look at because some of these part-timers are at a high rate. And so do we really need them? Because as he mentioned, maybe there's other people there that we can those slots to fill in those slots. It may mean they may travel to 2 or 3 campuses. Hey, it's a job. So those are things, and I wanted to interject that, Patrick, because since you're adding all the savings that can be, there are ways that we can look at as well.
And just go by right there. And just for clarification, Mark is the one with, okay, so I know we're getting off him. He's the one with hair. Okay. And that doesn't include the things that you mentioned earlier, just on that site relocation of the 86,000. That's 20% of the vacation days that we're talking about for the money. So if you could come back and consider, we would really appreciate that. In your class, we would really appreciate that. The other thing you may want to talk about policy being, you may want to look at your policy for compensation for different administrative positions. My understanding is that policy says that if you're in a certain position for a year and you're reassigned to a position of lesser pay, you keep that pay for a year and then you're supposed to go down. That has not happened consistently in this district. There are still people who are making the same amount, and they've been out of those positions for 15 years. And that's a whole different argument where we need to sit down and look at compensation for not only classified and make it more transparent, and also for administrative too. Because a lot of people have not figured out how somebody gets to that salary. And that could be additional savings there too. On policy, on DGBA, local, if you look at the next to last page, where it's talking about level 3, we have concerns. Right below number 3, it says, at the level 3 hearing, the administration intends to rely on evidence not included at the level 2 record. The administration shall provide the employee notice of the nature of the evidence at least 3 days before the hearing. Okay? And in the past, it's always been policy where everything's been presented at level 1. And so if we can prove at level 1 and at level 2 there's a foundation, something can be trumped up to throw that out. And we don't think that's a very good idea. And I think that's what John was alluding to earlier when we talked about the abatement. And then right below that, in paragraph 4, you have who's going to determine whether the complaints in open hearing or closed hearing. Okay, that conflicts with other policy you have. I believe it's BEC legal, which actually gives it back to the employee who decides what's in, whether the hearing is going to be in public or in closed. And the last thing, part of the conversation that came up also when we were alerted by classified last week was when they started taking money out of checks to pay for the vacation leave that they no longer have because it's already been figured into their pay, into their salaries. We're giving you a copy of the Texas Constitution and Texas law where we don't think this is legal. So you may want to reconsider how that's going to be done. Other than that, thank you for your time. I want to thank Mr. Garcia and Dr. Atkinson for the time they've given us and including us in the process and educating us. And we look forward to working with all of you. Thank you.
Thank you, Mr. Hammes. I will now adjourn this meeting.